anyone who's grown up in a very religious space, the taboo is greater. The shame is greater. And that's generally because in the more religious spaces, abstinence is like very much the focus. If you were abstaining and if we taught about abstinence, that was going to be how everyone would learn. There was also the fear that if they did educate the children around what happens if you don't abstain, then they're going to do it.
This is Listening to Understand, where sensitive Jewish truth seekers gather in a safe place for candid conversations on challenging topics. When we listen to truly understand and not in order to respond, we can replace judgment with curiosity and open our hearts to every Jew, regardless of their personal choices. As Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. I'm Atana. Let's get started. Galya, what a pleasure. Galya, what do you do and why are you so passionate about it?
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. What do? I am a sex and relationship coach. I am a wife of a rabbi, but I don't call myself a rebbitzin because I don't practice specifically as a rebbitzin in what I would deem as a rebbitzin. But I have studied intensively the laws of halachah around Taharat HaMishpacha and the mikveh and relationships and marriage and just what Hashem wants from the Jewish woman within the relationship, but also to understand what my purpose is within that realm. And because I started learning about mikveh and Taharat HaMishpacha and I wanted to teach brides, I realized this great need for sex education that we didn't get when we were in school because I went to a religious school and it just wasn't done. We don't speak about anything in the body. We had to fight to get biology as a subject when we were in older grades because in my school, there was like, no, biology it's not what we learn. We don't learn about the body. We don't learn about evolution. Like, no, we don't go there. So it wasn't something I learned and it wasn't something that was given over in school. And my mother was very open with me. She was incredible. She always gave me the information that I was looking for. So I never had questions, but I realized how many people do have these questions and how many people weren't getting the right resources or answers or the space to get this information that was so needed. So I went and I did a course and I studied this. And when I became a sex coach, it was like just eye-opening to me how many women were so ready to learn and wanting to learn and how this was such an important thing. But then at the same time, they didn't really want to come to classes and they were nervous because what if someone sees me and then are they going to judge me? So I've been working in private practice, but at the same time also slowly branching out into like group sessions and different things where we can include more and more people. That's what led me also to creating my Instagram page where it's a judgment-free zone. You can get the information easy and reliable. It's also, you don't have to show up and no one has to see your face, but hopefully through me speaking about it, I can help break down those taboos.
Did you start this once you were approaching your getting married and your relationship with intimacy?
No, I only started it once I was married already. Before I was married, was studying a BCom. I wanted to do like business management and like in my mind, I was in a very funny space where I wanted to like just be a CA or like something big in a company and be like some passionate woman. But I always knew that I had this passion to help people and to do something big, but it was never really clear to me. And I always hated the degree that I was studying. It was like, why do I hate this so much? Like it was easy for me because my brain works with numbers and whatnot, but it wasn't. And then over time, I moved into a different degree, which was more therapeutic focused. And then as Hashem showed me the way, I managed to get to this point where it just made much more sense. And a few years into my marriage, that's when I started studying Taharat HaMishpacha and Nida and mikveh. And that's where it all spiraled.
So what's the passion behind it? What's the drive of you becoming the shaliach to all these women? Why Galya?
It's such a funny thing that you asked me this question because I was actually speaking to my husband about it today. Like, why me? Like, why am I on social media and doing this? Like, it's no one in, at least my community in South Africa is doing anything close to this. And it's such a big deal. It really is. But it became very clear to me when I would have conversations with women and they would be heartbroken because of something that happened in their relationship or something that went wrong in their mind. And when I would hear what it was, I was like, because I had the education from my mother and from like healthy resources growing up, I was like, but that doesn't sound like a problem. That sounds normal. Or that doesn't sound like something I'd be worried about. Or that doesn't sound right. Why are you living with that? Sometimes women would say, women would open up and talk about how they're experiencing pain or whatever it was. I also was teaching in a high school in the beginning of our marriage when I was also studying, I was teaching. And I was given the task of teaching about mikveh and Torah mishpachah. And the girls' faces lit up when they learned about these topics. And they're like, it's so amazing that you're talking about this. And the school that I was in was so happy for me to teach it. And I was like, wow, people want to know this? Like, okay, this is something that needs to be spoken about. And then I would give talks or whatever it is. And every single time the feedback was just so positive. Like, thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us. Like, I didn't know about this. I really wish someone would have told me this sooner. And then it was just very apparent to me. Like, I even met with the Beis Din at one point and spoke to them about like how we could do more for the community. But because I'm young, they were like, just give it a few years. Let's see where you're at, which is okay. I'll deal with that in.
They didn't trust that you're ready for it? Or do you think that they felt that you're too young to take up such a heavy, important subject?
The Dayanim in themselves, I had a relationship with them because I also worked with them at a point in, I did a lot of things, but I worked with them at one point. So I was very close to them and they heard everything. When I came to them with stories from women and everything, they were very understanding and open. I think change is just not an easy thing. And when things have been done in a certain way for a really long time, it's not easy to just change it.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt like if I was just speaking about this openly and helping more and more people, as many as I could, and whether I implemented it into the systems or not, that wasn't up to me, that was up to Hashem. But at least I was putting the information out there. And yeah, I have huge respect for the Dayanim. I think it's just, I know these things aren't simple and there's always politics and whatever that happens.
That's beautiful that you said, I'm not going to continue. I'll do what I can with what I have now and let Hashem do the rest. That's so beautiful. That's showing up and saying, I have a platform. I have a mind. I have a voice. I'll share it. And if one woman gets some insight or comfort or even desire to learn more, I did that. And that's enough.
Absolutely. It's actually something my husband said to me today. I was like, if you inspire one person, that's all that you need to do. And I was like,
yeah. It's really one conversation at a time. And I relate to it a lot. I relate to, like, sometimes we want to fix the world, but we forget that it takes time. And not only because the conversations take time, even within ourselves as human, processes take time. It just takes time. My daughter came back from SEM. Actually came back a few days ago. And I said, Javi, I just listened to a video from 12 years ago where I was talking to you and I'm mortified. I want to delete it. I said, I can't even believe that was me. Like, was that me as a parent? Like, no one taught me how to talk to a child. And it was probably like something so simple. But now me, my evolved person, as a human, as a parent, as a Jew, I'm like, that's not okay. And then I didn't even know. Yeah. So it takes time for us through life and experiences to really evolve. And I think it's a holy work what you're doing, Avodat Kodesh. So I want to tap into the taboo. So we know that sex, intimacy in general, worldwide, every secular book will write about the taboo. Even Esther Perel talks about it, right? The top of the top talk about the taboo about sex and intimacy. Why is it so taboo when it's the most beautiful thing? It's the most beautiful thing. Why are we so much shame and secrecy when it comes to the topic of sex and intimacy? And this is one part. Why is there so much shame? And do you believe that in the Orthodox world, there's another layer that the non-Orthodox world doesn't have?
It's a brilliant question. I think depending on someone's upbringing, the level and layer will be worse. As a whole, within the very Orthodox community, definitely. Within any religious community. I see this with my clients, whether they're Christian, Muslim, anyone who's grown up in a very religious space, the taboo is greater. The shame is greater. And that's generally because in the more religious spaces, abstinence is like very much the focus. And in a lot of the sex ed for the last how many years, it was abstinence. If you were abstaining, and if we taught about abstinence, that was going to be how everyone would learn. Because then they would learn only within marriage, and they would just be, we don't have to really worry about it. The problem with the education system pushing abstinence is there therefore wasn't any education for anyone who wasn't abstaining. Because there was also the fear that if they did educate the children around what happens if you don't abstain, then they're going to do it. And they were afraid in the religious world, if they educate, that means they're going to do it. But actually studies have shown, and this is more recent, I think, and this is why it's slowly evolving, but studies have shown that actually when you dafka educate them and educate the world, people make better decisions. They make healthier, safer decisions, and therefore not educating and pushing abstinence is actually more dangerous and leads to far more negative results in the long run for people and for just every encounter that someone has without the education than it does with the education. So I think that is shifting in the world. But because of that, and because of how strong religious movements were within the school systems and with everything, abstinence was always pushed. Abstinence was the goal for most places. And that created a huge amount of shame and fear of talking about it and talking about sex and speaking about reproduction and speaking about what happens in the body. And I think today you still see it because it filters through in the parents. It filters through the parents to the child. Unless we work on breaking down our own shame, and if we work on understanding where that shame actually came from, what messages did we hear that led to that shame? Do we still really believe those messages? Or are we open to doing a bit of more research and understanding, do those messages actually apply to us? No, most of the time they don't. And then we have to really restructure our thought processes around this and disable that shame in order for us to move forward. And I think it's the parents that don't do that, it filters through into their children. And you'll see when I'll see even with clients, when I'll have a conversation with someone who's young and I'll say, oh yeah, period. And they're like, it's usually like they can't speak about it. They shy away. It's like usually because their parents and the people that are surrounding them don't speak about it to them, where it's uncomfortable for them. They weren't ever taught that this is a comfortable, natural process thing. It's a generalization, but that's very common for me to see. When it's not normalized, the shame just gets greater. And in the world at the moment, I think sex hasn't been normalized in it's normal, healthy, beautiful. It's still very shameful. Sex in most people's minds is when they'll go to pornography and...
Yeah, why is that? Why is that there's association with naughtiness, with like, I don't understand that. It's one of the most beautiful parts of life. And how do we make it so dirty?
Because it's exactly that. When you don't speak about it, it becomes this hidden secret. So the first time a child is getting any exposure to sex is because their friend searched something on the internet and then they saw this naughty thing and it's all hidden, naughty, shameful. There's no healthy exposure. They don't walk in to their mother's study like me and see a book with the word sex written on it and are like, okay, it's a book with the word sex written on it. And they just move on with their life. It's always shameful. It's always private. It's hidden. Because of that, it becomes shameful, private, and hidden. You don't want to talk about it because it's something that you were doing when you weren't supposed to be doing it and you couldn't talk to anyone about it and you had no space to just openly be like, there's nothing shameful about this. But people don't have the skills or the tools to have those conversations in the way that's healthy, so they avoid it. Because the way they would have the conversation might be with the things that they're struggling with. And then they don't know how to have the conversation. And that's why, on the side, I created a guide for parents in order to teach them how to have these conversations, in order to give them the skills, because we don't have it naturally. It doesn't come naturally, especially if we've grown up in a world where like you must keep your privates private and don't say that word in public. And everything was always just like hidden and shameful and bad. The only connection we ever had to anything sexual is like the exposure through other people exposing us, or us searching on the internet or searching or looking in a book and getting that exposure, but we had no one to discuss it with. And so I think it all comes from that same root.
Yeah, there's no space to say, this is what's normal, this is what's beautiful, even though it's normal and beautiful. There's a time and place, and this is what happens. And these are the challenges that might come up. let's not make it tameh. Let's make it a reality with lakol zman va'et. There's a time and place for everything. And how do we use it appropriately? All these conversations. And then the shaming the man for masturbation. Can we talk about it without saying you're going to go to hell? Can we talk about that it's normal to want it and a normal desire and why? Right? So having these conversations. What I see is when we do these black and white, okay, so until you get married, it's off the table. And then you're about to get married. Let's have quick chassan kala classes. We're going to talk about your body quickly. And we're going to talk about your job in the relationship. Okay, this is what you need to do in the relationship. This is how it's going to work. There's so much going on before you get married. This tremendous amount of knowledge dump. And you have no idea what they're talking about because it's the first time you're really analyzing it. If we're in that category of the shame of discussing it. And then you get married and you have to be the most intimate. It's like an on and off switch. And is it possible to even do that?
It's definitely possible, but does it work? Is it the best way? No. I always use the term, like you go from zero to hero. Like you have to literally go from nothing to everything and you're expected all of a sudden just to make the switch. And it's not easy. It's really hard. And for so many couples, it really affects their first few years of marriage. And some it can affect them so negatively. And like, it's a challenge that I can't understand why we want to give our children. Why should we opt to give them this challenge in the beginning of their marriage when we can actually alleviate it by having healthy conversations with them throughout their lives? And we can alleviate them struggling in an area that is so fundamental to their relationship because they feel confident and knowledgeable about it and they have who to ask or they have the information from all the years that they've learned about it. And it's normal. It's just normal. The same way when you get married, it's not a big deal. In fact, how to do laundry. Yes, it's more stressful because you're doing your own laundry and no one's helping you, but you know how to do it and it's normalized because it's part of your life and it was always spoken about. And then this is like this taboo around talking about what sex is and, you know, how people will often send me a message. I'm going to the mikveh tonight, but I don't want my children to know. So what should I tell them? And I'm like, that you're going to the mikveh. They're like, but no, they're so embarrassing. And I'm like, why? It's a huge, massive mitzvah. You're awesome for doing that mitzvah. So why shouldn't you be proud of it? You don't have to tell your children what you did after the mikveh and in the detail that you did it. No, that's private for you and your husband. But the fact that you're doing a mitzvah is beautiful. And going to the mikveh it allows, but it doesn't necessitate having sex.
Preach.
You can go to the mikveh and be tahor and then choose when you have sex with your husband. It doesn't mean that you come home from the mikveh and you have to get into bed with him. And I think that this notion that we don't understand that, or we do understand that, but yet we still think if we tell someone we're going to the mikveh, it's going to be embarrassing. But I don't understand that because if you're walking down the street holding your husband's hands, it's as much telling them you're tahor as me going to the mikveh and telling him I'm tahor. Yet people associate mikveh night with sex night, so therefore they're scared to say it because then they associate you're going to know my business in an hour.
I agree with you. I think that people are going to hear and say, it's not that we're embarrassed, it's private. And going to the mikveh is the most private thing. Yet it's not private at all because you're sitting there with 15 other women that are probably in your community that know you went to the mikveh. It's not private. And maybe some people wanted privacy because of the taboo. But I do believe it's interesting about telling the children. That's very interesting. And how much do you share with the children about what a mikveh is? Like, at what point do we share with the kids about mikveh? Do they hear from their friends that mommy goes to the mikveh? And at what point do they find out? And why does she go to the mikveh? And what happens? And separation? And why is daddy and mommy not kissing this week? Why are they not hugging? Like, what is this? So I do understand that some people want the privacy, but is there really privacy or is there a lot of shame?
I could be wrong. And maybe when someone listens to this, they can come and message me and tell me their personal experience. But I truly believe if you don't expect that people have sex because they go to the mikveh, do you think women would be more open to going to the mikveh and not being embarrassed when they saw their friend there or someone there?
Probably.
Because going to the mikveh itself is not embarrassing.
Right.
If you take away the sex element, all of a sudden it's just a mitzvah.
Taking a break for a few seconds to give you a quick announcement. If you haven't joined our Listening to Understand WhatsApp community, please do so now. There's a link in the show notes. We're going to be sharing more exciting stuff only for the members of the Listening to Understand WhatsApp community. See you there. Galya, I really think this is such an important topic. Even though I'm going to come back a little bit later, I want to come back to the idea of how we can normalize that it's hard in the beginning and we won't know. And because it's new, it's going to take time for both of us, the man, the woman, have conversations about it. And don't expect it to be what you see in the movies in Hollywood. Don't expect it to be perfect right away. Expect to have a lot of conversations and expect to ask other people and expect to read about it and expect to have an evolution through it after the first birth, or maybe the first time you're having sex, maybe the first 20 times you're having sex. Is it lubrication? Is it not? What's foreplay? It's all new. So let's normalize that we're not going to get it right away. And maybe even for a few years, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure ourselves out. And that in itself is what needs to be normalized, that it's okay to not know and take your time. Take your time to get to know each other sexually.
And it's also okay to reach out, to get guidance and help, and to get the education you never got in school.
And go with your partner to get help, because it's an important part of what you're building together is that both of you should be okay with it. So go get guidance and get the information and go together, and let's normalize going together. Just like you get chas and kala classes, they should go for the first year. You're not broken if you're going to ask. You're broken if you're not asking, I think, because you think you can figure it out alone. And the likelihood of you both figuring it out alone, coming from a Beis Yaakov system that doesn't teach so much, is probably 0 to none for you figuring it out alone. It's not natural. It's just not natural. That's why there's so many books out there on the topic.
It's beyond me. Hi. I will teach you so much more, and I will show you the whole world there is to intimacy and to sex and to
experiment
and to exploration. And exactly. Someone said to me, you have to be married for a couple of years in order to know these things. And I said, no, you can learn these things. There's no such thing as only because you're 10 years married should you be having good sex. No, you could be having good sex 1 minute into marriage if you knew what you were doing and you were prepared and you felt confident and both of you were on the right space and path together. But how are we supposed to know that? But also, just another point, it's not on the kala and chosin teacher to teach you this. Their job is to teach you about mikvah and taharat hamishpacha and nida. Their job is not to teach you the ins and outs of sex. They're going to give you basic sex ed because they have to, right? But it's not their job to give you more than that. They should be getting this education slowly over years. They should have basic sex ed by the age of 9. What they're getting in color classes, they should have by the age of 9. And that should be built up over time. So for 9 for some families, some other families might want to do it a bit later, but still, by teen years, by the time their body has started puberty, they should know the basic sex ed that is taught in most kala and chosin classes. Thereafter, there is a whole world of connecting intimately, understanding your erogenous zones, understanding orgasm, understanding how the body functions, understanding what desire is, what spontaneous and responsive desire is, what it means to be turned on and what it means to be turned off, and how to deal with it when you're experiencing the turn-offs and turn-ons and your partner's not on the same wavelength or your partner is, and your partner wanting to try new things, and how to navigate that, and how to have the conversations about sex, and how to try new positions without feeling shame, and how to feel beautiful in your body. And these are just the tiny drops in the ocean, and I've said so many things of what sex ed is. And there's no way you can expect a color teacher to do that all in a few sessions. It's not fair on her. Even if she was as educated as me in terms of the sex ed, I'm not saying I'm the most educated person, no, just clarifying that. But even if she had the same, even myself, when I learn with brides, there's only a minimal amount of information I can give you before you're married, because if you can't practice only a short amount of time, but also a short amount of time. You often go for color lessons and you've got 3 weeks till your wedding, or 8 weeks, or 9 weeks. You have a million
things going on.
You've got a million. You can't spend 4 hours a day learning about this. Right. However, that's where buying books, reading resources, doing something like my course or other people's courses, I could give you which courses are great, and having literal resource lists And that should be, yes, on the Kala and Chosin teacher to give them these resources. The problem is, hashkafically, people are too scared to suggest anything because
for exploration.
Or maybe there's a lot of amazing books out there, but some people will say, I can't read this book because there's one chapter in that book that I disagree with. Because it talks about, let's say, I don't know, let me just
something that they don't agree with.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, I could, because it could be different for everyone. So I don't want to give a specific.
Exactly.
But they won't buy the book because they disagree on a chapter. Why can't you skip the chapter? I don't know. Like, so many people will say to me, I bought that book and then I looked in the contents and, oh my gosh, you're telling people she should read this book and it talks about this. And I'm like, so don't read that chapter. It doesn't make all the other chapters non-applicable. I think that's one of the things when it comes to sex is people don't realize that, like, it's not a be all or nothing. It's not Pornhub or missionary. It's not one or the other. There is a million elements in between, and every couple is going to decide that for themselves. And I think that's so important, is that, like, your resources, as long as they come from a reliable, reputable space, you don't have to take every single thing that person says as Torah Moshe Misinai, right? It can be that you don't necessarily agree with that element, but you've learned another element.
I also think that the couple should meet to have conversations, not during sex, not during the sex, to speak about what went right, what went wrong, what their expectation was. Just have these conversations within yourselves without saying, I'm afraid to bring it up because I don't want to shame the other side, whoever it is. So if it's a husband wanting to request from the wife, it's the wife wanting to request from the husband, have a healthy outlook on sex and don't wait years to have these conversations because life is falling apart. Okay, fine. Let's go to a sex therapist. Let's go originally and let's figure it out and have conversations about it in the most natural, beautiful way because it's important. And
Absolutely.
Ask and be okay asking your partner what went right, what went wrong. This is all new. Let's evolve. What did you learn about it? How many chazan kalas really speak about sex before they get married? Probably very little actually speak about sex before they get married because they go to chazan kala classes. And it's very hard to talk about your relationship with it because it's shame. It goes back to the shame. So much of the stress and the curiosity and things that can come into marriages, into the relationship, that if you talk about it, it's not personal anymore. We're together. We're here together.
Absolutely. And also, I think this is why I do what I do, is that, like, if I often teach chosim and kalas once they're married, they'll come to me as a couple, not because they're having problems, but because they never got the sex ed they needed. And it's not negative. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And I'll teach you what are normal things to do and what are not normal things to do. And if this turns on your wife, this is what you should be focusing on and not doing the things that don't turn on your wife or turn it off even. Just desire discrepancies and give them that information so that when it does come up for them, it's like, oh, but I know that a desire discrepancy isn't something I should be worried about. This is the information I have and this is how I can navigate it. Or, oh, it's okay that my husband wasn't able to have an erection for forever, however long I expected it to be, because this is a normal thing, whatever. The point is that there's so much that is thought to be negative and bad and wrong. And then the way let's use an erection for an example. A random time with a man having an erection problem is not a problem, right? But let's say it happens during sex and the wife responds in a very negative, oh my God, is it me? Do you not think I'm attractive? Do you hate me? What's going on? I feel so bad. It's because of me, or you don't love me. It's going to create an anxiety and a stress for him. Now, what's going to happen is that erection problem, which was just a fluke by mistake, what a random thing that happened, is now going to become more often occurring because he's worried and stress creates the problem. And he's worried that it's going to happen again and therefore it happens again. And then she's not responding correctly. But if she knows, oh, it's normal, and this is when it's no longer normal, okay. So she doesn't need to stress and she doesn't need to respond that takes it personally or feel upset or feel like she's been betrayed.
And it's her.
Because it's not personal.
Right.
Exactly. Because it's not personal. And I think that's like the key. It's like understanding when things are normal and at what point it starts to become not normal. Pain during sex, discomfort, any of those things. People don't understand. They'll hear from their friends, oh yeah, it's so sore on the first time. It's so sore for the first year. It's so sore for, it takes about 6 years. So then she's sitting with pain for 6 years because her friend told her that it was sore for her for 6 years. And you're like, no, my angel, that's not how it works. It's not supposed to be.
It doesn't
You're not supposed to ever have pain.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
You're never
right.
supposed to.
It's okay to ask and not wait until the anxiety and everything is so heightened to just say, okay, this is what happened. What should we do? Should we go see a doctor? Should we not see a doctor? Is this normal? Should we wait? Is there, maybe it's the time of day. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's hormones, really, for the male and the female. Hormones, so much to do with it. Maybe there's grief. Maybe there's fear. So much affects our sexual reactions and activities and production of hormones from other biological things that are happening in our body. And we don't give it enough attention that we're this multifaceted human being. And if we're parents, even more so, we were worried about the children. And you know what? Let's go back to the mikvah now. Because we're talking about children, let's go back to the mikvah topic. So there's this idea, this notion that mikvah night is mitzvah night. You have to have sex on mikvah night. Now, you know what? I wasn't a college teacher. I don't know. I don't remember even what I was taught. But I took everything I learned from my college teacher with a grain of salt because I knew that I'm coming with me. I knew right away that I need to be connected to myself. So I know I have anxiety from other people's water. I'm a little bit OCD. Going to the mikveh for me was a disaster from day one. I had to be the first one. I had to never on a Friday night because I can't shower afterward. And I knew it. And I was very clear with my husband. I'm going to only go to a clean mikveh. I'm going to only go when I'm the first one. If it's a bad experience, I'm just telling you, I'm going to come back very sad and disappointed. I'm going to need you to just hold space for me and just hold me. And I don't know where I'm going to be. I don't know emotionally, physically where I'm going to be. But chassan classes and kal classes very much emphasize, oh, you were a nida now for 2 weeks or whatever, longer. You need to be in, Alpulin talks about it, betafkid, and it's your job, like performing, it's your job, right? And there's such stress around it versus, oh my God, I missed you. Let's just unite intimate without the pressure of the sex. So where is this pressure of the sex coming from? Is there sources in halachah for it? What do you teach your kalas?
I think that two things. I'm thinking, as you were speaking, there were so many things coming to me. So two things. The first thing is mikvah night is a mitzvah. It is already mitzvah night because going to the mikvah is a mitzvah. Any other mitzvahs you do along the way, you want to give charity while you're driving home to the beggar on the side of the road, that's also a mitzvah. You want to come home and you want to do, I don't know, you want to, whatever it is, it's a mitzvah. But you can also choose not to do mitzvahs at every point in your day, right? Just because something is a mitzvah doesn't mean we have to be doing it right away. You stop at like in South Africa, it's a very normal thing where you stop at a red light and there'll be a beggar on the side of the road and you can choose to give them money. You can choose to drive on. And right now, it's not the time to give them money. It doesn't make you a bad person because you didn't give them money at every single red light. No, it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a human. When you can, you do. And when you can't, you don't. And it's the same thing with sex. It's this mitzvah concept that like the mitzvah's here, so therefore you can't miss the opportunity. The opportunity is not going away yet, right? You're still tahor. And you're not missing an opportunity that you can never get back. What you're doing is you're actually being true to your genuine self, which is I'm not going against my bodily autonomy and doing something that I'm uncomfortable with because it's a mitzvah. Because that wouldn't be a mitzvah. Because having sex when you're not consensual is not a mitzvah. It's actually the opposite. It is worse. So if you're telling me that it is, you have to just perform and fake it and be on the best show experience for your husband when he arrives home because that is the mitzvah, then I'm telling you that you're probably doing an avera because you're not having sex consensually. You're not actually wanting to be there. You're not mentally there. You're not physically, you may be physically there, but you're not really there. And that's not sex. And that
it's not intimacy.
Goes against,
it's not taboo.
Exactly. It goes against the closeness, the connection that we're supposed to be creating through sex. So it is so much more valuable for you to cuddle and connect and get close again and find your footing in your physical intimacy and go into a space of having sex from a place of, I'm excited and I want to have sex, as opposed to I am just doing this because I have to. Because every single time you do that, you actually betray yourself. You betray your body and you tell yourself that what you feel does not matter. And that causes resentment, that causes anger, that causes shame, that causes body images, which all then actually affects your sex life. So anyone who's like pushing that narrative, I really don't understand where they're coming from.
Is there a halachah? Is there any makar? Because you learned the halachot.
No, the makar is if you want to. It's very simple. If there is consent, it is a mitzvah. If there is no consent, it is no longer a mitzvah. And consent means both parties are willing and wanting to be there. It's so clear in the halakha. And I think like when a teacher teaches that it's a mitzvah and she's all like airy-fairy and she's so excited about it, I don't think sometimes they realize how they can land with someone in the fact the difference between a mitzvah and halakha is very different, right? When something's halakha, on Yom Kippur, you fast, right? Unless you obviously don't need to fast. That's the law. And even within that law, there's heterim and the space to allow for the human experience. And that's the same here. Like, there's no law that when you come back from the mikveh, you have to have sex. There is no law that says that. There is a law that says you should only have sex when it is consensual. And therefore, that's what we rely on. That is what we should be understanding. And also, I think there's a deeper question here is if you have a healthy sex life and it is a good, happy place, your relationship, what's holding you back then from wanting to be intimate on mikveh night? When you have the opportunity, what's holding you back? If anything, that to me is a great space to now explore that with your spouse.
Machuz. It's not about maybe you're tired, maybe you had a hard day, maybe you have a migraine, maybe you have a big day tomorrow, maybe you want to maybe there's a million things going on. And maybe there's even something, maybe he hurt me that day emotionally. Maybe I got insulted 2 days ago and we didn't resolve it yet. Maybe I don't want to feel intimate I don't want to be intimate right now before I feel resolved with this part.
Absolutely. But that's an indication that there's something there that you should be speaking about. There's something 100%. There that you should be discussing with your partner 100%. And not ignoring it, having sex to please them, and then feeling even worse. I promise you, it will only make your relationship worse if you're doing something out of a place of, I feel obliged to do this instead of, I want to do this. Even when you're fighting with your spouse, right? Sometimes there's a part of me that's like, I should just say sorry because I know I was wrong, right? Or even if there wasn't right and wrong in that situation, I was out of line in the way I responded or whatever it is. Sometimes saying sorry when you're not ready makes it worse because you're now resentful for that sorry that you 100%. Gave because you weren't there yet. So instead, you can acknowledge, I know, my love, that you have been looking forward to having sex with me because we haven't been able to for 2 weeks. I acknowledge that. But in the end of the day, like, how can I connect with you and how can I share the space with you in a way that is comfortable for both of us, where both of us feel seen, where both of us feel heard? What is it on my mind that I can share with you and what is on your mind that you can share with me? And can we come to this conversation without judgment, without attacking one another, without coming from a place of negativity? It's going back to the example I was giving, like instead of saying to my husband, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have spoken that way, I say, I'm not ready to apologize because I haven't gotten there yet, but I want you to know I acknowledge that I shouldn't have spoken that way. All right, give me space and time to get. That's it. So until you get to a place where you can truly come to the relationship and give you all, you sometimes need to take the space within yourself to find that. Because you chose to be obviously in this relationship. You chose to be in this space. You're with someone you, please God, love and is treating you right. And you're treating them right, please God. There should be, which is not easy, but there should be a space where we're able to have this is the ideal. Obviously, even within the ideal, it's not always perfect. The ideal is that we should be able to express ourselves and say, today was so hard. I didn't have time to prepare. And then the preparation for the mikveh was so stressful. And the mikveh ladies commented on my weight and then this and that. And I feel like terrible right now. I don't really feel like being together. Like, what can we do that will make us feel connected? Because I still want to connect with you. I'm not trying to disconnect from you completely. I think that if you can approach it in that way, if we could all approach it in that way.
How to have the conversations about what's really going on versus feeling if I don't, then I'm letting them down. They won't be able, which is going to take me to the next question that a lot of women would say, he didn't have sex for 2 weeks or whatever. If you gave birth, it's 6, 10 weeks, whatever. How can I do it to him? If I cuddle with him, what's going to happen to him? Like, it's easy for me to say as a woman sometimes, like, I don't, but how do I do that to him? Do you hear that a lot? I hear that a lot.
Yeah, I do. I think that's part of a bigger problem, to be honest. It's part of the problem of how men were taught about their bodies and how they don't have control over their bodies and that they're supposed to be pleased and obliged. I think there's a greater issue there if she's dealing with that. Why has she internalized those messaging? He can't wait another night, really? You have to go against how you feel. He can't wait. You're not saying I'm not having sex with you forever. You're not being a woman who is being dafka, who is withholding. I'm not talking about withholding or doing it on purpose. I'm talking about you have
That's already a whole different subject. That's of unhealthy relationship, period.
Exactly. 100%. That's a whole different. I'm talking about a healthy relationship where you're not in the mood. There's a fine line when it comes to I'm not in the mood, but I can turn myself on and I can be in the mood. And once I'm turned on, I'm going to be happy to be there. And then there's, I'm really not in the mood. I've got a migraine. I cannot get there. If you need to know yourself well enough to know maybe, and this is what I was saying in the beginning, you might have responsive desire. In other words, you don't desire sex unless you're responding to stimulus and then you start to desire sex. So maybe you don't desire sex, but once you start kissing, once you start cuddling, you start to desire sex and you want to have sex.
Right.
And if you don't, then you don't. And if he needs to control himself, that is something that is separate. It is a different discussion here. And I don't think it's fair that we have to equate the two with one another. That if he can't control himself, she has to now become a vessel. No. If he can't control himself, that's between him and God. That's between his relationship with Hashem and his relationship with his body and something that he needs to understand. But it shouldn't diminish from her relationship. Then that dynamic doesn't make sense to me in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most important thing is being able to be honest. I've said, baby, I've got whatever's happening for me and I can't get there tonight. I've tried to turn myself on. I can't get there, but prioritizing tomorrow, even prioritizing it to the point that if you come home at 4:00, I'll be able to have a nap. So I'll feel good and I'll be ready to be together with you or whatever it is. You need to know what you need in order to make this a priority in your relationship. If you're having desire problems in general and you never want to have sex and it's an issue for you, that's where professionals come in and this is where we can help you. But I think it's important to understand your body and understand what is your accelerators, what makes you excited, what makes you want to have sex, and what makes you completely turned off and makes you disconnected and not want to have sex. And understanding that, you do also have 2 weeks. You've even got this Shivana Kim where it's getting closer and closer to mikvah where you can decide, is there things that I'm able to implement within this week that will get me to a point of being ready on mikvah, if that's important to me.
I think it's important to have these conversations as a couple. What could we do that I could be well rested, that I could be prepared? Is there anything that we want to discuss beforehand? What are you looking forward to? Not just looking at the mikvah night as a time to have sex, have a quick orgasm, connect, and then just say, okay, now we're allowed to kiss and hug for 2 weeks. Great.
Exactly. And it's also about the buildup of like, is there emotional intimacy? Because if for 2 weeks he's ignored you because you weren't anything better to him than someone to have sex with, then of course you're not going to want to have sex on mikvah night. You shouldn't want to have sex at all because there's no relationship. So there's a greater question of what's going on in the dynamic of, are we in tune? Do I feel close to you? Do I feel connected to you? Do I want to connect to you? And why do I not want to connect? Unless there's something an actual reason out of your control. What's going on that I don't want to connect to you? And is there a way for us to manage that? Is there a conversation that we need to have? Is there time that needs to be spent together? Is there a space for us to talk it out with someone safe if we need? Is there education we need? Are we having very unsatisfying sex? So it's not something I really want because it's very boring and I don't get anything from it and I don't understand it. It's asking yourself those questions and understanding exactly who you are and what your body needs and what's important for you, and being able to share that with your spouse, them being able to hear it and understand it as well. I think one of the biggest skills is being able to share something in a way that your spouse can hear it, as opposed to just share something and then they don't hear what you were saying. I think that's a big struggle for a lot of people when the one person's saying, all I need is love. And the guy's like, but I'm giving you love. And then really what she needed was a cup of tea because that was going to make her feel loved. But she never asked for the cup of tea. Sometimes it's about, are we communicating clear enough that the other person's hearing us in the way we need them to hear us, as opposed to the way we're communicating and they're hearing us in the way that they're hearing just what we're saying.
Having grace for that
understand.
Time. Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes it's hard for us to articulate what we want and what we need because we're not really clear, because we never had these conversations with ourselves, but we're expecting our spouse to know exactly what we need without even asking ourselves what we need. And then we feel broken. Oh my God, why doesn't he know what I need? He should know. He should be a mind reader, even though I can't even write it out specifically. I just want to feel a certain way, but I don't know why. So
100%.
Giving grace to that time that we're evolving humans, male and female, very different hormones, very different ways of reacting, very different needs in general. And we're just trying to do it together, mindfully, slowly, peacefully, with integrity. I think there's such a fear of spilling seed. I think a lot of this is behind the fear of spilling seed. I know I wanted to speak to you a lot about birth control and other things that I'm going to bring up. Maybe we'll do a part 2. But let's wrap up with this fear of spilling seed and the damage it can bring to a relationship that wants to grow with intimacy.
I think it's so sad that boys, when they're young and their minds are, what's the word, they're like a sponge. They're taking all the information that's been given to them. And in that vulnerable space, the information is often given over to them in such a harsh, critical way, as well as to girls at such a young age. Puberty, instead of being taught in a beautiful, amazing way, it's funny, and this is what happens to boys. They could have a wet dream, or it's taught in this, you're a terrible person, killing babies. Taught in such a shame, negative, painful way. Of course, it's going to create absolute horrors in someone's mind for years after that. And the first thing that has to happen is it has to be taught differently. It has to change. That just like any other thing that we're not good at, we speak Lashon Hara and we mess up, but we come back and we fix up and we do what we can. It has to be taught in a way that when we're not perfect, it's okay. Hashem did not create us to be perfect. Hashem did not create your body to work this way and expect you not to have it work the way it works.
Yeah.
There's no way. I don't believe that there's a God who created a boy and was like, I'm going to give you the worst challenge of your life and you got to just be fine and grow up with terrible shame and hatred towards yourself and your actions and everything that you do. No, I don't believe that's Hashem's intention. I think that is what religious people have skewed it to become. But the truth is Hashem is saying, you are my child. And I want this holy semen, I guess, is for a specific purpose. And the truth is you can't get married at 13, not in today's society. So you're going to have a challenge that people didn't have when I gave this halachah over originally. And even then, I still think that there's understandings that are greater than us. And I'm not a posek, so I can't speak to them. But that if there was a Sanhedrin today and if there was more Rabbonim who could paskin to this degree with the Ruach HaKodesh that was this originally came out with, it would look different. I really do believe that. I don't believe it would look the way it is because we have changed so much. However, because there's no way to have that discussion and there's no way to create that space without the Beis HaMikdash, without Mashiach, we are going to be in a space where we have to give ourselves grace. And there has to be a space for men to understand that they are human, that if they masturbate or if they spill seed, that it is part of being a human and they can do better next time and they're okay and that Hashem still loves them and that they can always do better next time. I think that this idea that they can't control themselves and they don't understand their bodies and they're not going to be okay, and it's just so unfair to tell us a 13-year-old boy that he has no control. He can't even look at a girl's pinky finger because he has no control over his urges and his desires, and he's just a terrible person when he falls for those things. What are you setting him up for? What are you doing? You're hurting this child. Rather say to him, you know what? Your body is amazing. It's going to do some things that are going to feel different and you're going to learn that your body's going to desire things and you're going to listen to your body. And sometimes you're going to be able to say like, no, I'm not today. Or I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to do something else. But sometimes you're not going to be able to do that. And if that happens, you're human and you're okay and you can do better tomorrow.
And it's not the wife's responsibility to protect her husband's wet dreams or semen or masturbation or behaviors.
No.
It's never the wife's responsibility. That we can do a whole episode on that. I do want to have you on again to speak about birth control, sex during childbearing years, relationship in those times, like how maybe even menopause, how we change as women. There's so much to cover. And I think this conversation, as you said, there's so much to learn about it. But maybe what we gifted the world is permission to be curious, to permission to deep dive into it, permission to speak to our children differently, to have these open conversations, to understand that it's human and it's beautiful and it shouldn't be this deep, dark secret that we only leave for our bedroom. Have these conversations with your spouse, with your children, maybe even with friends and communities and open it up. And I appreciate so much the work you do. I have 3 questions I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to do this fast because we need to wrap up. What is the biggest myth that you keep on hearing over and over from your clients?
That's a hard question. The biggest myth, I guess I'm going to go back to what I was thinking with in terms of my clients, because I think this is what comes up the most, is that marriage is like the movies. And then when it's not, and when sex isn't like the movies, and when sex isn't like porn, then something's wrong. I think the biggest myth is that we're not actors, that we're supposed to be these actors. We're supposed to be in a play and having all these experiences that are literally a performance. Yeah. So I think that's, if I'm answering quickly, that would be the biggest thing, is that we're not.
I love that.
That's not reality. There's so much more. And there's even more beautiful things that we can appreciate that they don't have in the movies. But we don't see that. So we don't understand that it's beautiful. And we miss out on those elements.
Very beautiful. Thank you. If there was anyone you can meet from the beginning of times till now, who would that be? And what would you ask them?
That's such a hard question. Wow. I'd probably meet with a woman from Tanakh, possibly. Maybe like Esther or Leah or Rachel. Probably Esther. Or maybe Miriam, actually. Miriam was, she was a powerful woman.
She was a cheerleader for intimacy.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe her. But the truth is, like, if I'm really honest, like, I'd probably want to meet my grandmother again. Like, I really miss her. So nice. If I could go back and choose someone, I would go back to the woman who raised my mom.
Wow. And what would you ask her?
I guess I would ask her what it was like to live in a world where things were so shameful and so scary. And how does she manage that? Because it's scary and shameful now and it's hard to manage. So I wonder how she would have done it then.
Where was she from?
Actually, in Lithuania.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Galya, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your courage, for being so outspoken on such a holy topic. And thank you for changing the system for at least future generations. Maybe touching upon this generation and hopefully for future generation, that we can approach intimacy and sex from such a beautiful way versus taboo, shame, and maybe even a broken way. So thank you for your Avodat Kodesh.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Beautiful conversation. Thank you for listening to Understand. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please hit that follow button on your favorite podcast app. This way you don't miss an episode and you help us grow. You are part of our growth. We appreciate your support and we hope you choose to listen to us on our next episode. We'd love to hear from our audience. If there's anything you would like us to research, to talk about, please contact us on our website, listeningtounderstand.com. And if there's any insight that you got from this and you want to share with others and you are happy for us to read it out loud on our show, send us your insights. Send us your thoughts. We want to listen to understand. Bye till next time.